And good afternoon. I'm Randy Price. My partner and good friend is Matt Price, and together we're the Price Group. We're glad that you have made the time today to join us for what we have found to be a very interesting and a very valuable topic. You don't have to pick up many newspapers or listen to some of your friends or neighbors. Cybersecurity is a big, big deal. Seems to be getting bigger almost every month, every year. We've titled today's educational webinar, Cybersecurity Threats and Defenses. So I think you're in for some good information. Who are we? Family owned and operated the Price Group, 45 plus years of experience. We are fiduciaries. 90% or so of our clients are either at or close to retirement, and we sit down with them and help them work out a game plan to more effectively navigate the complexities of retirement. Should you listen to the Price Group, we've been very honored to have gotten some notoriety from some of the different institutions mentioned there. Matt and I both have our Certified Investment Management Analyst designation from the University of Pennsylvania at Wharton, and we are both certified financial planners. Speaker today is James Morrison, 22 years with the FBI. Wow, that's a great career in itself. Taught classes at Quantico and served also in the U.S. Air Force for 8 years. James, we've heard you before. You got rave reviews. We welcome you once again, and thank you for taking some time to share with some of our folks what to look out for cybersecurity. The floor is all yours, sir. Thank you again.
All right, let me switch my slides here and bring mine up. All right, so thank you very much, first of all, for the introduction. As introduced, James Morrison retired about a little over 2 years ago from the FBI. I'm out of Houston, spent 8 years in the Houston office, 14 in Albuquerque, and then 8 years Air Force prior to that. One of the things I realized in the last 3-4 years of my time in the Bureau was that we were seeing this very prominent, growing cyber criminal threat. And this wasn't just a threat to defense contractors and businesses. This was a threat to every American. And so I started doing presentations over my last 2 years in particular, targeting or trying to get out and educate people around why we're being targeted by these criminal groups. These are not kids living in basements anymore. 1983, the movie War Games comes out, and Matthew Broderick plays this hacker living with his parents, and accidentally, hacks into the Whopper computer at Cheyenne Mountain, which does not exist, by the way. I spent my 5 years in Colorado Springs. There's no Whopper, but there is a large computer system there for those of you that are interested in that. But what we started to develop there is we developed this vision of these criminals being very disorganized. That the targeting of companies was somewhat random, and that just truly is not the case. What we now know the truth is that, let me get that slide, is that these criminal groups are operating out of countries around the world. In many cases, they are operating with the tacit approval of the governments in which they reside. This is especially true in Russia, where the cyber criminal operations are an extension of Russian foreign policy. But we've also started to see, and we've seen this meteoric rise, is there are criminal groups now operating out of countries like Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Vietnam, Cuba. A couple of weeks ago, I sent out a warning about a group operating out of Colombia, and another one operating out of a very random country. It was kind of surprising. But the point of it is that these groups are targeting Americans for one simple reason: money. Last year, Verizon said 92% of cybercrime was financially motivated, and that's held true over the last 3 to 5 years. But what I've also found that's very fascinating is when I go out and talk to people, when I was here in the Houston area, I was all over at Rotary clubs and chambers of commerce. That's how I actually met Matt Malinek, was doing financial presentation and doing a presentation with a local financial advisor, people think that they come up to me and they'd say, well, I don't understand why somebody's coming after me. I don't make that much money. But what we have to realize is that outside the United States, everybody thinks Americans are rich. My first 2.5 years in the Air Force were in the Philippines, and every Filipino thought that every American was wealthy. So it's not about having a multi-million-dollar bank account. It's not about being, having top secret information. It's the fact that if they can get $1,000 out of you, they've made money that they didn't have. So please put away that idea that they're coming after you because you have lots of money. It really doesn't have anything to do with that. This morning on Good Morning America, they were talking about cryptocurrency scams through dating apps. And I'll talk a little bit later about relationship fraud, but people are finding themselves, meeting people online, and then these people are asking for them to help them do investments into cryptocurrency, and then they rip them off and they steal that money. So these scams will continue to evolve, and they will continue to target us as long as there's money to be had. So in 2020, we saw about 330 million people victimized across 10 countries. That includes, of course, the United States, a lot of Western European, the UK was listed in this group, France, Germany, but also, and this is what really lends more credence to the financially driven crime, also oil-rich countries like Qatar and Abu Dhabi were targeted by these criminal groups in order to get money out of them. What's kind of sad about this statistic is it's low. We actually believe the number of people victimized in 2020 was closer to 500 million in those 10 countries. But a lot of people don't report the scam because they're either they feel guilty, they feel like ashamed, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to shame the victim. What we want to do, and this is something I was very passionate about in the FBI, and even more could remain passionate about, we need to catch these criminals and make sure that they pay for the crimes that they commit against us. These criminal groups are often targeting senior citizens in the United States for a variety of reasons. But they're also targeting groups that might not trust the law enforcement, groups like immigrants or people who are impoverished. So what I want to do is, if something happens, my goal today is twofold. One, I'm going to give you some very solid ways to avoid being a victim. That's my first goal. My second goal is that if something should happen, and it does, it happens to us all, we have to report it. And I'm going to show you how to report those crimes so that groups like the FBI, groups like Homeland Security, Federal Trade Commission can go after those criminals and try to bring them to justice. So that's my goal. Now, what's also kind of fascinating, from a sociological standpoint, is that these criminals are paying attention to what's going on in the United States. We're in tax time now. Tax fraud will rise exponentially over the previous year. Every year we see more and more tax fraud committed against Americans. So we have to be aware of that. We have to recognize that our information is out there on the dark web for sale. Golden example. Last week, I pay to have a company monitor the dark web for my information. Most of what I see is passwords. This company suffered a breach. Your password has been lost. Make sure you change that password. Last week, somebody got my social security number. I was notified on the dark web that my social security number was for sale in a large data breach. So what I did was I immediately turned around and bought LifeLock. Now, the reason is LifeLock can be expensive, but I know that LifeLock does a really good job of monitoring the credit agencies for any sort of people using my social security number. So this happens to us all. It's a very common occurrence. I haven't seen anybody use my social security number yet, but I would imagine that within the next couple of years I will. So it was a preparatory measure. So these criminals are paying attention, and they will come after you based upon what's happening in your area. Why? Again, I talked about financial, but here's how big cybercrime is. If I could take every cyber criminal in the world and put them in one country, it would be the 14th largest economy in the world. One of the reasons that Russia supports cyber criminal activity is that they take a cut of every cyber criminal action that comes into their country. So the banking oligarchs in Russia get a cut of every cyber crime that's committed in Russia. So, it is a huge boost to their economy. And they have no reason to try to break down those criminal groups. And that's only going to continue to get worse. So $6 trillion last year, that is 1/3 the GDP of the United States. By 2025, this number will reach $10 trillion, which is half the GDP of the United States. So this problem is not going to go away as long as they're making money. So my goal, one of my stated goals in this presentation, as well as in my life, is to stop letting them make money. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to get them to stop making money on us? Well, first we got to know how they're targeting us. Ransomware. Ransomware is not something that only hits corporations. Ransomware hits home users as well. And so I'm going to talk to you about what happens if you click on something and you get infected with a virus, how to avoid getting infected with ransomware on your home computer. The second thing is that we have all of these internet connected devices at home, and those devices can be used to victimize us. So we're going to talk about mainly anything with a video camera and voice activated devices like Google Home. And then lastly, phishing, right? So we're going to talk about phishing. Why is phishing the most reported crime? Because it's successful. Social attacks are very successful in America because people get curious. People look at an email, they look at a text message, they get a phone call, and they start to have an emotional reaction to the information that's being given to them. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Frank Abagnale last year, who's the subject of the movie Catch Me If You Can. And Frank Abagnale went to jail for his crimes in that movie and then became an expert for the FBI on how to prevent certain crimes. And what he was doing, if you ever get a chance to watch that movie, what he was doing in the 1970s is social engineering. He was calling up TWA and saying, hey, how do I get a new uniform? And they told him what clothier to go to get a new uniform. And once he got there, he got the tailor to talk to him, and the tailor said, oh yeah, we just bill these back to your paycheck. All I need is an employee ID number. So people sometimes want to talk about things that are of interest to them, and in doing that, we give up too much information. So what we have to do, one of our defenses is, even before the phishing, we have to start looking at how much of our information is out there publicly. And I'm a big proponent of, we as a country need to push back and start not allowing this data to be shared as freely as it is. So social attacks: phishing, whaling, pretexting, baiting. Phishing is the one that you're most likely going to see. And when we think of phishing, we think of emails. So we get an email that comes in and it says something like, this is the IRS. You are in trouble. You are delinquent in your taxes. You need to click on this link and log into the IRS website and make an appointment to meet someone. Or a phone call where they call and they say, this is the Social Security Administration, and you're getting ready to lose your benefits if you don't provide some critical information. These are all examples of phishing. What they're doing is they're specifically making the message, they're composing it in a way to attract your attention. They're also trying to convey a sense of urgency to get you to have an emotional reaction. So we don't want to do that. That's my first thing, right? So anytime somebody reaches out to you, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an email, whether it's a text message, if they're reaching out to you, the first thing we should greet that with is skepticism. All right. A couple of years ago, it's about 4 years now, I got a phone call saying that there was a doctor calling from Southwest Memorial Hospital saying that my son had been in a car accident and was in the emergency room. Well, my son doesn't live with me here in Houston. He lives with his mom in New Mexico. So because of skepticism, I immediately said, really? So tell me something about this hospital. Is it at the corner of Beechnut and Bissonnette? And they said, there was a pause, and they said, well, yes, but that's not important right now. What was happening was as I started asking questions back to this person on the phone, I realized they were not a doctor. They were not here in Houston. They were outside the United States. And within 3 minutes of the conversation, they recognized that I was not falling for the scam. And the person actually said that to me. They said, you realize I'm trying to scam you out of information? I said, yes, sir. I realized that about 30 seconds into the conversation. And he said, well, it's my job. It's what I do. Have a good day. Well, I did a little research. I was still in the FBI at the time, and I did a little research. And this particular guy was calling from a help desk or a phone bank in India that was already under investigation by the FBI and Indian police. There are groups in India, there are groups in Pakistan, there are groups in Nigeria that run 24/7 phone banks specifically designed to get you to give up credit card information or your social security number. Please recognize that. So if you get a phone call and it seems like it's, a little weird, trust your instincts. Do not fall for it. Here's the problem though. Sometimes we get a little curious or we get a little greedy. 20 years ago, they started a thing called the Nigerian prince scam. And if you've not fallen for this or not ever had the distinct pleasure of seeing a Nigerian prince email, I'd love to share you with them, because I get about one a week right now. And what this email says is, it says, hello, I am whoever. I am the treasurer for the Nigerian royal family. We are trying to move our money outside of the country because of all the political unrest, but it's held up in customs and we need your help. And we're like, oh, really? You need my help? Me, poor old guy out here in Houston, Texas? And then they say, well, if you give me $1,000 to help me clear customs, we will give you $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 once the money clears customs. And you'd be amazed how many people fall for this, because they're like, what an investment, right? That's the thought process. If I give 1,000, I get 10,000 back, except there is no Nigerian royal family. There is no money held up in customs. And people say, oh, wow, I guess it wasn't real. I ran into a couple in College Station many years ago now, and I was talking to them as I was leaving the presentation. And the husband said that he had given over $8,000 to the Nigerian prince scam. And his wife is shaking her head. She goes, I keep telling him it's not real. And I said, yeah, it's not real. And you know that. He goes, yeah, but maybe this time it's true. And I guess I was somewhat shocked by that response. But there are people out there that will give money to these groups thinking maybe it's going to be successful. Sorry, folks, but that's greed. It is. It's just, we think that, if you want to get, money the right way, you invest it. Talk to Randy and his group and the Price Group, and let's make sure we can get your money invested the correct way. But people fall for those kind of scams all the time. When you get that phone call, when you get the email, slow it down. Slow down. Especially on a phone call, get a pad of paper, write all the information down. Who are you? Okay. Where are you calling from? Okay. What's your phone number? And here's the critical piece of information on the phone call. Let me call you back. Just by telling the person that you will call them back, they are probably going to try to ramp it up and get more of an emotional reaction out of you, because they know that the odds of you calling them back are low to none. Now, let's say they bite. Let's say they say, okay, call me back. Do not call the number that they provided. If they say they're calling from the IRS, they say they're calling from Social Security Administration, calling from the FBI, I want you to look up the legitimate number on the government website. Don't trust, because they'll tell you that phone number is my desk number. Don't fall for that. Call them number. You have that person's name, you have where they're located, and say, I'm asking for agent whoever at wherever, and they will connect you to them wherever they are in the United States. So let's see. Somebody's asking if they get a copy of the deck. I will provide a copy. I think a PDF copy to Randy. If not, let me know, Randy. I'll give you another copy of that. Is Credit Karma okay? We'll talk about it as we go forward. Credit Karma's okay, but the problem is that Credit Karma can be slow to react to somebody using your credit currently. So, for example, if Credit Karma doesn't give you an immediate reaction to somebody opening up a line of credit, what'll end up happening is that you won't find it until you review your credit at the back end. So Credit Karma works okay as long as it's real time. And I think there's different levels of service you can buy with Credit Karma. I am going to talk about freezing credit a little bit later as well. I think freezing credit is important, but I think it's sometimes it's in combination with something like Credit Karma or LifeLock. All right, so answer that. All right, so slow it down, research the facts. I'll be honest, I also do this with do this even with charities. If a charity will call me and want me to donate money, I will take a look and say, see somebody's texting me. I will actually, research the facts for that charity and then tell them I'm not going to give money to you over the phone. I'll give it to you on that website. So slow it down, research the facts. If there's a link, if you get an email or you get a text message, do not click on the link or attachment unless you are absolutely sure it is from the person that sent it. One of the reasons is that it is very easy for people to hijack an email account from someone else. Last year, I received an email from it came from my aunt's email address and asked if I could buy them gift cards for my niece's birthday. And I knew that this was a scam for a number of reasons. One, I haven't talked to my aunt and uncle in a long time. Number two, there's only 3 nieces on that side of the family. And I know when all 3 of their birthdays are, and it wasn't anywhere close to any of them. So I responded to this person and said, sure, I'd love to help you if you can tell me how you know me and where we met. And I got no answer. So what that meant was somebody was inside of their email account actively because I respond to emails very quickly. And so somebody was using their email right then. So I called my aunt and uncle, had them change their password and have them put up 2-factor authentication. So even if the email address is correct, if the communication is unusual or something that person has never done, you need to reach out to them via text message or a phone call and make sure that they intended to send you the link or attachment. All right. So here's what happens. If you want to click on those links or attachments, here's what could happen to you. Number one, I could take over your account. If you're in your email account and you clicked on an attachment I sent, I could actually take over your email account and use your email account for my purposes. So I could then turn around and fire emails to other people. Number two, I could launch ransomware onto your computer. Now, what's that going to do? Well, it's going to prevent you from accessing any files that are on that system. It's going to overwrite them or encrypt them and then demand you pay a ransom to get it back. Well, how much is that ransom? Well, sometimes the ransom is between $400 and maybe a couple $1,000s for a home computer. Okay, well, I'll pay the ransom. Well, even paying the ransom means that you probably aren't going to get your data back. These are criminals, by the way. And if you pay money to them, the odds of them deciding, oh, you know what, they paid me, I'm going to be nice and give them the data back is low. And in general, it's 1 in 3 get some data back, and less than 10% of people will get all of their data back by paying the ransom. So please don't find yourself in that situation. Lastly, if you click on a link or an attachment, I could install something called a keystroke logger, which is a piece of software that will let me track everything you type on the keyboard. And it puts it into a file, and I can copy that file off of the computer. And then I would get all of your usernames, all of your passwords, anything else that you typed on your keyboard during the time I was capturing it. So don't click on links and attachments unless you're absolutely positive you know where it came from. Now, people working from home, and maybe it's not necessarily just working from home, but using the home networks. There's sort of this funny belief that people don't believe that their home networks are vulnerable, or they don't believe that hackers care about home networks. And that's just really not the case. A couple of years ago, I sent out a warning about Russian hackers actually using home networks to hide in order to attack corporate networks. So your home networks are vulnerable. Your home networks could be used. There are threats and vulnerabilities inside of them. So we got to accept that. The problem is on home networks, though, is that we often share passwords between multiple accounts. So we're going to talk about passwords a little bit later, but please recognize that by sharing passwords across multiple home accounts, you could find yourself vulnerable to using those passwords in other online web accounts. So if you're working from home, or let's just say not just working from home, let's say you're using home computers for financial purposes, lock them down. So what I mean by that is when you walk away, make sure that those computers are locked, and or powered off at the end of the day. There was an old IT maxim that said you don't power off your computers because it actually causes damage to a computer. That's just not the case anymore. Most of the power supplies in modern computers can take that on and off power without causing any damage. The password to your Wi-Fi is often written on the router. So if you've got home Wi-Fi and you have a box that you got from your Wi-Fi provider, and there's a password written on the side of the box that you still use, you got to make one of two choices. You want to cover that password, whether with tape or with a piece of paper, or you want to change that password. And the way you would change that password is you'd write the model number of that device down, go on YouTube and type in change password and type that model number in, and you'll get a video on how to change that password. Okay. Here's why. A couple years ago, many years ago, we had a child pornography case. We went out to a house and it was an 80-year-old man and a 79-year-old wife, which really doesn't fit the profile for child pornography. But this person, somebody had from this home, somebody had downloaded a lot of child pornography. They had risen to our radar on the search. I asked them if they had a computer. They said they did. I went back, looked at it. The computer had not been logged in for over 6 months. It was a computer that they had for their grandkids. But again, somebody had logged in from this computer or from this network. As I started talking to them, they said, well, there's this nice young man next door. Now, of course, with FBI, there aren't any nice young men next door. This guy was coming over and doing some odd jobs around their house. But when we ran his background, it turns out he was a convicted pedophile. And he was not allowed to have internet at his house. So he was actually using their Wi-Fi to connect up to the internet. And he'd written down their router password and it had never been changed. So please, please, please do not use the default router password. And if you choose to, you want to cover it so that nobody can walk in and use that password, without your knowledge. Also, separating personal and work devices. Now, for many of us, that it's not about personal and work as much as personal and financial. So if you're using a home computer or you're using a laptop or a phone or tablet for financials, as well as using it for personal information, I want you to be very, very careful what software you install on those devices, especially phones and tablets. The biggest threat to your phone is going to be downloading something from the store that's malicious. Last year, Google said there were 3.5 million downloads of malicious software, bad software to people's computers and phones. And when they were asked, they said, well, that's not our job to protect the consumer. It's up to the consumer to make sure they're downloading the correct software. So it's up to us to make sure that whatever we're installing on our phones, tablets, or laptops is not doing bad things. So how would we know if we downloaded something bad from the store? Well, number one, if you download something and it doesn't do what you want it to do, right? So let's say it's the wrong software, uninstall it immediately, right? So get that software off there. Number two, if you download something and your phone or computer starts acting, and I'll use the word weird, or starts giving you strange indications, it's probably the last thing you installed that's causing some problem on your device. Uninstall that last application. Three, if you have too many things installed on your phone, and I do this about once a month, go through and uninstall any app you're not using. So go through your apps, make sure you get rid of things that you're not using. Those devices could be using your data, but also they could be used by a bad guy, especially if you're not logging into them very frequently. All right. Internet of Things, home networks. I talked about two devices that we have to be careful of in our home networks. Number one, anything with a video camera. So laptops, computers often have a video camera associated with them, but also we've seen new devices that have video cameras on them. The number one is home exercise systems like Peloton or Mirror, which are two very common home exercise devices. They do have cameras on them, but also there are some smart TVs that have cameras on them. So any device, if you buy a device, it should tell you there's a camera on it. I want you to be very, very careful about where that camera can see. So you want to make sure you don't put them into a sensitive area of the house where somebody could access that camera and take screenshots of you or of a loved one, and then turn around and use those pictures against you. So if they're in bedrooms, they're in bathrooms, make sure they're covered when they're not in use. Because the criminal, you're not going to know that the criminal is on your camera. The camera will be able to turn on without your knowledge. So video cameras is number one. The second is any sort of voice activated device. These are Google Home, the one from Amazon. Those devices are always listening to you. So please understand that. There is even some indications that Siri on an Apple phone listens to you when you're not on a phone call. So Apple is not allowed to listen to you when you're on a phone call because that's a wiretap. But like if my phone is sitting right here, right now, not on a phone call, they are allowed to listen to it by the law. There is no law protecting against that. So be very cautious about what you talk about in front of those devices. Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all of them, they share and sell your data all the time. So any of these voice conversations can be turned into a marketing conversation. Example, a couple of weeks ago, I got in front of my Alexa and I said, I would like to buy a brown jacket. And within about an hour on my laptop, which is connected to the same network as my device, I got an advertisement saying about different brown jackets. That's what they do. They sell that information to other like web browsers in order to launch advertisements against you. So be very, very cautious about that. But they do it, and it is legal. So with smartphones, the biggest threat is what you download. So be cautious about what you download. If you download something and you think it's weird, uninstall it, move on. But what we've also seen last week, the FBI sent out a warning about SIM swapping. So what SIM swapping is that they will collect information about you or me as a customer, and then call the phone service provider impersonating us and get the carrier to swap the mobile phone number to a new SIM device. This is a SIM that's controlled by the thief. Then once your phone number is mapped to that SIM, they will go in and start using your account to buy product or actually make other financial purposes. So you want to make sure that you contact your phone provider and make sure that they have a password in place that is that only you know. A lot of times, like Verizon might have a PIN code. It's a 4-digit PIN code. If you can, have them upgrade it to a full password, and then just make sure you write that password down somewhere in your house. But SIM swapping is on the rise, and it allows them to gain access to different accounts and impersonate you for financial purposes. USBs, so flash drives, right? So we all have them. These little flash drives. If you find one of these just sitting around somewhere and you don't know where it came from, do not put it into your home computer. All right. Curiosity can kill you with these USB devices. There are viruses that can be put on a USB that automatically infect your computer. They can also steal all of the files from your computer if when you plug them in, and you won't get any sort of indication that happens. So be very, very cautious about picking up USBs and putting them into a computer or a laptop. Now let's talk quickly about passwords, right? So people always ask me, what's the most common password in the world? And it's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, followed by the word password. And these are still commonly used. We run into companies that are using password or admin as their username and password. So if you're using any of these as your password, I would strongly caution you to stop doing it, right? These are too easy, very easy for a bad guy to break into. One of the problems also, though, is that a lot of people will store their passwords in a Word document or a spreadsheet. These are not safe places to store passwords unless you have a password on that document. So if you're using a Word document or you're using an Excel spreadsheet, you can put a password on those to protect those passwords. But here's our problem with passwords. Passwords are actually the worst ways to secure information. We have to create a new password, So we all sit there for a second and we say, oh, I have a password. Either it's one we've already used and we might increment the number by 1 or 2, right? I know a lot of people do that. You'll pick a 3, a 4, or a 5 character word, follow it by $, number sign, or underscore, and then end it in numbers 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, or the year. 59% of Americans use a date as a password. Now, this date could be a birth date, could be an anniversary, but these are all public record. We also use kids' names, pets' names. All of those pieces of information are public record for people in the United States. I can run any email address through a thing like backgroundchecks.org, and it will tell me everybody who lives in that house or who has ever lived in that house. It will also tell me what social media accounts you have. So if you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on whatever, I can then go on to social media and gather more information about you. So we've got to be very cautious about, what we use as a password. So the biggest thing we have to stop doing is stop using the same password for all websites. Because if one of those websites you use loses that password, the criminal is going to then turn around and use that password on other accounts of yours to see if you duplicated that password. A couple of years ago, my brother-in-law, his in-laws, he's remarried, his in-laws found somebody in their email account. And this person was trying to get their financial advisor to change the disbursement account for their retirement, their 401k. And when the financial advisor received a form from them asking to change the routing number and the account number for the disbursement account, their financial advisor reached out to him and said, hey, I'm trying to process this, but I wanted to check to make sure it was actually you. That was when they realized somebody was inside their email account. The reason? A couple of years before that, the MGM Grand had suffered a breach, and they had used the same password on their MGM Grand account that they used on their email account. Your email account is critically important. You've got to make sure that the password for your email account is unique. You shouldn't use it anywhere else. One of the ways to track all your passwords is to use something called a password manager, which is a software package that stores all of your passwords. Now, people go, wow, that seems like that's not very safe. Well, it's a whole lot safer than using the same password over and over and over again. And the different password manager companies that are out there have never suffered to date a breach of their data. So there's a couple types of password managers. Number one are cloud-based or web apps. These are Dashlane and LastPass. I've used LastPass since 2009. They have not suffered a breach or loss of my passwords since that time. And that they were pretty new in 2009. Or if that's too risky, you can download an app. Things like Keeper or OnePass are applications that you can download to your laptop or to your phone that will store all of your passwords. Or you can also use, Apple has one built in now into their operating system called Keychain. And it stores those passwords and then backs them up into the cloud. So there are a number of different password managers that you can use. And I'll tell you, I also still use a written book. I have a book of my passwords that the main reason is that my wife can access it when I'm not around. So if something bad happens to me, she could get into my accounts and either bank accounts or whatever and take care of business that has to be done. So, but you want to make sure the biggest thing we have to avoid is don't use the same password for all websites. And just changing one number isn't a different password. In order for it to be considered a different password, you have to have a different word and you have to have a different character string at the back end of it. LastPass, that's lastpass.com, I believe I think that's the way it's spelled. All right. Also, we got to change our pattern. 90% of people start their passwords with a capital letter. 75% of our passwords end in numbers. Just by doing that, we make it easier for somebody to break our passwords. All right. So change your pattern. I'm a bibliophile. You can sort of see it around. So what I do is I pull a 4, 5, or 6 character word from a book. I have a special character sequence I use in the middle. And then I pick another 4, 5, or 6 character word for a second word. So I use 2 words with a special character sequence in between. That gives me a password somewhere between 12, it's usually 10 to 14 characters, because we really got to make our passwords longer. And I'll tell you why on the next slide. What some people will also do is they'll create what they call a passphrase. It's a sentence of like maybe it's a sentence from a book, and then you change certain characters within that sentence to numbers or special characters. So you might change a 3 to an E to a 3, an L to a 1, a 0 to an O, something like that. But that actually creates a password that's relatively easy to remember, but it's very hard for somebody to guess unless they know what quote you used. So I said it before, longer is better, and here's why. An 8-character password is actually very easy to break, no matter how complex it is. So I built password crackers for the FBI. I'm a certified ethical hacker, and I teach that class, here in Houston. And I can break any 8-character password in under 30 days. Now, how often do you change your passwords? Well, in general, most people do not change personal passwords more than once a year, if that. So an 8-character password is very, very easy to be broken. But look at the difference if I use a 12-character password with lowercase, uppercase numbers and symbols. It would take me 5 million years to break that password. It's mathematical complexity. So make your passwords longer. I say go to 12 at a minimum, but even if you went to 10, it would take me 900 years to break that password. So let's get longer on our passwords and make sure we continue to use them as complex as they are. Social media, know what you've posted, right? Know that whatever you've posted about yourself is permanent also. So if you post something on social media, you can't ever take it back. That's pictures, that's posts, comments, all of those things. And just because you get a message from somebody doesn't mean it's really from that person. Just like email hijacking is common, social media hijacking is also common. People can break into social media accounts and send things from them. So if you get something from someone that you've never communicated with, I'll call them if I can, or I'll text them and say, hey, did you mean to send that to me? And many times you'll find out that they really didn't. And also, just because you're friends with somebody in real life doesn't mean you have to be friends with them on social media. Some people get on social media and they get a little crazy and they lose their minds, but there is no anonymity online. Anything you post online can be tracked to you. One of the things we've also have to be careful of is these social media surveys. If you've ever seen them, this is usually a Facebook thing. They'll ask things like favorite color, first pet's names, mom's maiden name. This is personal information that is not easily found by a criminal group. And if you give this information in a survey, you may end up giving up security questions for password recoveries. So when you set up a new account on a website, it will often ask for security questions so that should you forget your password, it will ask you one of those questions. Now, one of the most common ones is mom's maiden name. Please understand that when they ask for that answer, this is not a test. They are not asking you to put the legitimate name of your mom. They want you to make sure that whatever you enter now will be the same answer you use later. So I have a list of how I answer these security questions. None of them are actually the truth. My mom's maiden name is not Kermit the Frog, but I've used Kermit the Frog as an answer to that question. So security questions, make sure you're aware. Do not give up that information to these kind of surveys. Should you find yourself harassed? Unfortunately, cyberbullying is not just for kids. If you find yourself harassed online, you need to document the conversation. If it's in text, if it's on a chat board, in social media, take screenshots of that conversation and keep those conversations. Then you need to disengage, identify the crime, understand what is the type of harassment that I'm suffering. Talk to your friends, make sure that it's actually legitimate. Then contact law enforcement with your documentation. Lastly, protect yourself, lock things down. My cousin contacted me last year and said that a former business associate had had a falling out, and this guy had gone on and created a web page in his name. and was using that web page to disparage him and publish very nasty stories about him. And he asked what he could do. And of course, first thing I said is lock your stuff down, make sure that he can't get into anything else. Then what he has to do is he's going to have to actually get a lawyer to get that website taken down. So it's not easy. It's not a lot of fun, but that's what he's going to end up having to do because of this online harassment. So if you find yourself harassed, document, disengage, identify the crime, and then talk to law enforcement. All right, let's talk about scams real quick. So what's interesting is the criminals have recognized that there's different tactics and triggers for scams based upon the age of the target. So they build a little bit of a profile on you, and they realize that you're over X age. Let's say you're over the age of 57. And they say, well, you know what really triggers somebody over the age of 57? Social Security, healthcare, or the IRS. So they will specifically target you, and they will target you through a phone call. In that next, younger generation, my generation, the 41 to 65, the emails and texts may be more common, and they're going to go after things like parcel tracking. So recognize that we all have triggers. These triggers could be something that a criminal could try to capitalize on. And it doesn't matter whether it's a threatening call from the IRS, FBI, Social Security, tech support, all of these things. These are scams that are common. You're going to see them. And when they come to you, we have to greet any call that we receive. You should greet it with a little bit of skepticism. The FBI does not call people and say that they're in trouble. It doesn't happen that way. At the worst case, what will happen is the FBI will call you and say, can we come see you? That's when you should worry. Because when they show up at your door, two guys or a guy and a girl in a suit, they're going to they're going to show you the credentials that they own. All right. But they're not going to identify themselves over the phone and then tell you you're in trouble. Send us an email. That's just not the way it works. Same with the IRS, same with the FBI, or same with Social Security. All right. Now, what's also kind of interesting is that in 2019, we started to see a new type of fraud targeting seniors, and that is romance scams. So romance scams are, people are looking for relationships, often online, and it will turn into a relationship where eventually someone will ask for money. People over the age of 70 are losing on average $10,000 to these romance scams. So these new cryptocurrency scams are just another variation on it. So here's what you do. If you find yourself in an online relationship or you're looking to get into an online relationship, you should talk to that person on the phone as soon as possible. You should have a video chat with them as soon as possible. You should meet them in a public location with backup. All right. And I've been that backup. I've actually been with my wife's friends to make sure that whoever they were meeting wasn't going to do anything bad. But money should never be a topic of conversation. Let me restate that. You should never give money or talk about money to someone that you only know through an online relationship until that relationship has turned into a more permanent relationship. Facebook says that on average, a woman with a picture or a female name will receive one unsolicited friend request a month right now. It's up to a month of a person who purports to be a doctor, lawyer, clergy member, or military member living outside the United States. Within 2 weeks of meeting you, they will start asking for money. This is also happening on dating sites where people will meet someone on a dating site and that person will start to ask for money very shortly after you start to have a conversation with them. So be very, very cautious. Anything that can be turned into money, you should not be giving that to them. That's gift cards, that's cryptocurrency. All of these things are just other ways money is trying to be transferred. Was contacted by a friend of mine from high school who said that her best friend's mom was in an online relationship and this guy was scamming her out of money. And I reached out and contacted her. She's 72 years old and she's been in an online relationship with a guy online for over 18 months. In that time frame, she has given him over $100,000 in cash. And when I talked to her about it, I said, do you realize this guy, he's 30 years old. You're 72. What is this relationship about? And she said, well, he's a nice young man and he needs money. And so I just gave it to him. So she was continuing to give money to this guy that she'd never met. The guy wasn't threatening her, but he kept telling her how he wished he had more money in order to be able to do things, and she was just feeling nice. Do not give up money to people that you don't know. It's a very bad idea, and like I said, it's typically a scam. So online relationships. All right, let's talk about internet fraud and identity theft. Internet fraud and identity theft are two separate crimes. Identity or internet fraud is simply the use of your credit card for something you didn't authorize. All right. So if that happens, somebody, just contact your bank, let them know. All right. Identity theft is the loss of your social security number or something personally identifiable. This is common across all age groups from 19 to 80 and over. One of the things you could do, and this is what we were talking about earlier, you can freeze your credit. Freezing your credit is the easiest thing to do because it's not very expensive. Often it's usually pretty cheap, and you can contact each of the 3 credit agencies and do this simply over the call. Now, if you feel like you want more protection, you could use something like LifeLock, or we were talking about earlier using Credit Karma. Those groups actually are usually cost a little bit more, but they're more active in the way that they notify you when somebody's using your social security number to create new lines of credit. So it's kind of up to you, but I think at a minimum, I would expect people, we should all freeze our credit. Secondary, I would then go into an identity protection solution. So protect yourself, make sure everything's kept up to date, back up your stuff. Do not leave pictures and documents in email, especially if those documents are financially, have anything that identify you financially. Social security number, credit card information, any of that. If there is a document in your email that has that information on it, you want to copy it off, put it into a into a USB or to a cloud service. Don't click on links and attachments. Turn on 2-factor authentication. That's a text message that is sent to you to validate that it's you. Password managers, and know that email is not trustworthy. Public Wi-Fi. Be careful on public Wi-Fi. In general, public Wi-Fi is insecure. Anything you send over public Wi-Fi can be seen by other people on that Wi-Fi segment. But should something happen to you, please report it to the Internet Crime Complaint Center. This is an FBI website and a call center in West Virginia. They collect information. Please recognize also that the FBI is probably not going to contact you after you file your complaint. And they won't probably do much investigation unless the total loss is over $100,000. If you want, can also file a complaint through the Federal Trade Commission. If it was a phone call, like a phone scam, ftc.gov. Or if you feel like it needs immediate call, you can call the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That is the end of the presentation. Are there any questions outside of what I've already answered? All right, I will stop my share. Let y'all bring your slides back up. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be here a little bit, or you can send it to mail@texascyberguy.com.
Well, James, as usual, amazing, a little bit scary, but I learn something every time I listen to you. So you're doing great work, and thank you for your live calling there to make a difference. So Matt, tell us a little bit about the Price Group and our cybersecurity guarantee, please.
Yeah, this is something we take very seriously, hence having James speak with clients of ours on a regular reoccurring basis. But our clients have the benefit of our cybersecurity guarantee. What that means is any information that is lost and it's found to be the fault of the firm or us, we will make you financially whole on that. And the reason we can make this promise is Raymond James, one of our custodians, our back office, spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year to make sure that the systems are in place to keep client information safe. So big piece of what we do, it's not just something Randy and Matt talk about. You can find it actually in our paperwork, but we think that's the wave of the future. And like I said, something we take very seriously. So we thought it'd be helpful with that information, just for clients, this will be a review. For those of you that are not clients, could be new information. Take the next 2 or 3 minutes to just briefly go over what our investment process, our retirement planning process looks like. We tend to get more questions from clients when there is some volatility in the market like we've seen here over the past 6 to 7 weeks or so. But Randy, what is our Live Well plan?
Live Well plan is our effort to do holistic financial planning. We talk about the plan must be written down. If it's not written, it's not a meaningful plan. And we help folks determine how much you can spend during retirement. Is your money going to last? What rate of return are you going to need? And what would the investments look like for my portfolio to help me get there? Benjamin Graham is quoted that the way to measure your investing success is not by whether you're beating some index, but whether you put into place a financial plan and also key a behavioral discipline to get you where you want to go. So our goal is the 3 C's: comfort, clarity, and confidence. For the first time, many of our clients have clarity that leads to confidence and leads to the ultimate goal of comfort. So Live Well plan. We're a little corny, I guess, Matt. Our goal is for everyone to indeed live well.
Yeah, so looking here, our family index number, what rate of return do we need to be, quote, successful? That's part of the Live Well plan. And our goal, unless you would tell us otherwise, is to take the least amount of risk possible for you to be successful. We define success as meeting your goals throughout retirement. Maybe it's, I want to leave the kids, pick a number, $1, $2, $3 million, whatever it might be. So big piece of that is solving for that very personalized family index number in retirement. And we think, do you need to have an investment process? A little bit of a softball question there, but we think the answer is an emphatic yes. From a standpoint, how much can you spend? What we detail in the Live Well plan. Discipline and income generation are 2 of the core principles that we use. Something we're talking a lot about here recently with clients is taking emotion out of the investing process. And this always seems to pop up when the market does have a temporary pullback, but doing that is what we think is a key delineation between being a, quote, successful investor and not being successful. Is, can we stick to the investment process that has a tried and true track record over a long period of time?
So if you'd like to review your Live Well plan, if you're a client, thank you very much. If you're not a client and have an interest in our Live Well plan, again, we think planning is one of the things that's a secret sauce as fiduciary. We sit down with clients, with folks that are not clients, and have a conversation. If there is common ground, we'll both know it. If there's not common ground, we'll shake hands and part as friends. We can do a meeting over the phone, via Zoom, or we are doing meetings in our office. So pick what might work best for you. That's Tiffany, that's Randy, that's Matt, that's Melissa. We are and Maddie there on the left-hand side. Please feel to reach out with us with any questions, comments, email or phone. And again, we thank each of you for joining us. We think this is a very important topic, and hope like you did, like I did, that took some notes with some to-dos on there. Matt, I thought his mother's maiden name was key. Kermit the Frog being his mother. So I picked that one up. But anyway, hope to see you real soon on one of our webinars. Again, if we could be of help, reach out to us. Thanks again for your time. Have a great afternoon.